Hey
Welcome,
everyone.
everyone. Oh, my mic was turned off. Welcome, everyone. Another episode of the Turning Point. I got myself like with the mic here, it was turned off. How are you doing today, Versan?
Can't complain. Just paying attention to everything.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Yes, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Unfortunately, Vandell, he's doing some sessions today, and David, I know, is on vacation.
It's okay. We can handle this, the both of us. But I hope next week they're going to be able to join us. I get some comments. People ask, where is Vandell? Where is David? In fact, it
Yeah,
has been very busy times for everyone. It's even hard for us to keep it up on a daily, on a weekly basis. I mean, it has been so much work recently.
I mean, that's really what we do here. Every day, the dynamics are changing and there's new content coming out, or narratives, you could call them, but we have to dissect them and understand the overall changes that we're witnessing. So we have a lot to talk about. It's going to be a fun conversation. I'm ready to get to it.
Well, I think one remarkable thing that happened is that yesterday I got a notification on my phone, and that was about USDT. So it's basically Binance was urging myself to swap any remaining USDT I had on my exchange wallet. So they were inviting every single user in Europe to swap USDT for USDC Circle, which is a MiCA compliant stablecoin. And we really see that the process of getting rid of Tether is accelerating very quickly. I expect that within 1 month, maximum perhaps 2 months, you will not even find Tether on any exchanges anymore. And it was really a call to action yesterday from Binance. If someone asks me why I had still some Tether, that is because I received a payment and I forgot to swap the Tether. So they were really sending me notifications like you really need to swap the Tether. And I think that also puts an end to some people that were saying that in the end, Tether is going to survive in Europe. We all know that that's a statement from the past. I don't think anyone can question anymore the fact that Tether is out of business in Europe, and that's a great sign that we are moving towards a regulated digital spaces. And I think what is not regulated is going to remain on the past. And I think real stablecoin perhaps is going to infiltrate the European markets in the future. So we have to be watching what's going to be next for the stablecoin issued on top of the XRP ledger. Any thoughts on that, Versan?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest ongoing issues in the crypto space really is the lack of transparency behind Tether's reserves. It's, like you said, not compliant with MiCA regulations and many other regulatory frameworks, which is why it's been pushed out of those European markets. But as we pointed out so many times in the past, Tether has a very close ally in the US government. And that brings us again back to that conversation we've had so many times about the revolving door between Tether, Bitcoin, and the US bond market. It really is a mechanism to extract and siphon wealth out of people's hands, but also a design to, I think, prop up the bond market that the BRICS nations are actively working on to devalue those bonds. So on one hand, they're doing everything they can to keep the US dollar afloat. At the same time, they're systematically devaluing something isn't adding up. So this is, I think, where the clash between compliance and risk actually comes into the conversation. And it's intensifying. If Tether were to actually collapse and lose its peg, like Terra Luna did in the past, the crypto market would be devastated. It would wipe out the whole thing. Bitcoin also could experience some massive retracements, possibly even go back to zero. Who knows? And it wouldn't stop there. It would also have a ripple effect, no pun intended, into the traditional banking system, triggering a collapse because of all the sheer amount of unbacked exposure.
I did a video a few days ago, and I want also to hear your opinion, Versa. I didn't publish the video yet. However, the fact that there is stablecoin regulation taking place in the United States and also in Europe simultaneously, Ripple issues a new stablecoin on the XRP ledger, which you once told me that you consider it to be the CBDC. We can call it somehow LUSD some form of CBDC.
Mhm.
And in the same way, we have to start connecting some dots, right? So if real stablecoins, the CBDC is the digital version of the US dollar, and the US dollar is the world reserve currency, and the United States wants to preserve its hegemony, and XRP is the gas token for the XRP ledger, which is also home for real stablecoin. In my opinion, that makes XRP the most valuable asset on planet. Do you agree with that
Mhm.
statement? And if you want to make some comments on that.
Absolutely. I mean, it is the most undervalued digital asset out there, which is why all the adoption is happening, yet they don't put any mainstream focus on it. It's slowly catching up as a trend now, geopolitically as well. But RLUSD, just to clarify something, it is a digital version of the dollar. It's a tokenized version of the dollar. And the dollar itself is a central bank liability. And if RLUSD is a tokenized version of the dollar, that means that is a liability of the central bank, hence being a CBDC. It's funny, some people in the community, they say Trump says no CBDCs on one hand, but on the other hand, they're issuing stablecoin, which essentially functions like a CBDC. So it's kind of ironic when they cheer no CBDCs, yet the infrastructure for the CBDC is already there. And by the way, RLUSD is the only institutionally regulated stablecoin out there. And over time, as regulations begin to evolve, you're going to see a lot of the value, money, liquidity kind of flow away from non-compliant technologies and flow into compliant technologies. So that's where like they can evolve the dollar's reach over time. And that kind of will keep the currency there. But I think where this is all going over time, and it will be revealed in time, is you're going to have all these stable coins issued on the XRP ledger or even the Stellar network. And these currencies, these national currencies, including the dollar, will evolve into just a regional currency while accelerating the notion of having a neutral sovereign bridge asset. And that would be the XRP itself. And sanctions have only accelerated this trend.
Thanks, Versan. And this document here, I always wanted to bring on the conversation. And I think right now is a great opportunity because currently there is a lot of food, and people are saying that Ripple has created the private ledger for avoiding to use XRP. There's a lot of people thinking that the private ledger is going to be adopted by banks, which at some instance is true. There is a reason why the private ledger has been created. However, I think this document here is phenomenal. I did a video on this, but it was one of my first videos on YouTube. It's a document from 2021. So I also want you, Versan, to have a look together. And by the way, I didn't have time to prepare the presentation. I really wanted to go deep on the document. So right now I have to kind of go through it live. So I ask you some patience, but this is a communication between Ripple and the Central Bank of Thailand. And there are two elements here that I want to address. One is that, just give me 1 second here. So here they are explaining how the private ledger intends also to escalate with federated sidechains, so they can actually handle thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or perhaps millions of thousands of transactions per second. So you can see here, the CBDC private ledger will handle thousands of transactions per second initially, with the potential to scale over time by using federated sidechains or via the interledger protocol. So also here mentions the interledger protocol. Over here we have that the CBDC private ledger is based on the same technology that powers the XRP ledger, which has supported the management of billions of dollars of value for over 8 years without any significant security or operational issues. And most important in this document, I will show you, is that by the page 11, there is a very, very unique statement which says, and this is Ripple is writing this letter to the Central Bank of Thailand. And I want you to pay attention here. So therefore, we request the Bank of Thailand to consider the role of a neutral bridge asset such as XRP can play in the design of a retail CBDC. in the same document that makes an introduction to the private ledger. It's the words of Ripple. They request the Bank of Thailand to consider XRP. So you have opened that Ripple suggesting them to utilize not only the private ledger, but the XRP as the gas token. So it's completely a food that the private ledger is not going to utilize XRP when you have evidences, which, by the way, this is not Ripple telling on their website or just some sort of marketing. As some people say, there's a conspiracy, right? That sometimes perhaps it's a conspiracy that the IMF, the BIS, Ripple are all meeting up and creating things to trigger retail to buy XRP. That some people think about this, but this is a private letter from Ripple communicating with the Central Bank of Thailand, which I got access years ago when I was obsessed with XRP research. So I would go everywhere to get this type of documents. And I think this right there is extremely valuable.
Yeah. I mean, it says a lot, you know. I mean, even in 2021, I was making statements about seeing XRP on the private ledger, and I'm going to clarify pretty much everything. I still stand by my statement, but I was watching a clip on YouTube where a trader in Japan was tracking the XRP price, and it just kept shooting higher and higher. My brother was with me. And in just a few minutes, I'm not even kidding, the price did reach close to $327,000 something dollars per token. Now, I know people are going to be like, oh, that's crazy. I mean, Bitcoin even reached 100,000 and it's not being adopted or purchased by central banks. Okay. And it's weird. It was enough to see that something unusual was happening. And just to clarify, I'm not the only person who's actually seen these price glitches, stress tests, or whatever you want to label them as. But what I explained it back in 2021 was simply what I saw. And my statements about private ledger were, first of all, based on some observations I made when I watched Brad Garlinghouse, CEO of Ripple himself, in 2021 mention the use of private blockchains on the XRP ledger. And that's really where I got my reference to cite that. And now, you know, in 2025, we have a much better understanding, all of us, right? Let's be honest here. We're here to learn together. And we have a better understanding now of how things have been unfolding and where they're going. And when you break it down, it leads back to the same conclusion. If XRP is actually meant to function as a bridge reserve asset at scale, that means global, then the price we already know has to be significantly higher to meet that institutional demand. And that's just basic logic when you actually understand the XRP ledger and the XRP token itself. So the possible price glitches, which now I recognize could be possibly stress tests to measure XRP's ledger's ability to handle extreme volume on private chains and future utility. Something else to consider, if you've ever read the book, it's called The Great Taking, and you know that wealth is actually systemically being extracted from people worldwide through home ownership, financial assets, securities, and then you have all the insolvencies of the banks. If they were able to seize those assets, and they're going to, what do you think happens to the money? It doesn't disappear. Remember that it moves. And if the system collapses under the weight of its own debt, that value has to go somewhere. Now, what I'm trying to put together here is that it's very possible that this great taking, as all the wealth moves onto somewhere else, right? It's going to go into digital. We know this. So then you look at Ripple, they've been building they've been building the rails for all this consolidation of wealth. So it's very possible that they're laying the infrastructure for institutions to consolidate the financial power, if you will, and I'm going to say it bluntly, to steal the money, the great taking, steal the wealth, and actually position it on the XRP ledger or just the blockchain in general, RippleNet, which is XRP in a sense. And then it would have to have a high price to meet that demand. So it's not speculation. I'm just trying my best to follow the facts, follow the money. And it's something to think about. It's a playful thought, but they are stealing wealth. And if they're going to put it somewhere, it's going to have to be on something that is infinitely scalable. And we can look at all the connections. I mean, we've been doing this for years now, Edo, and we're at a point where like some of us are laughing about this. They don't tell you what they're doing, but you could see it.
I totally agree, Versan. There is an underlying agenda behind this transformation. And before we get to the next topic, I want to reveal a small secret here. When you want to find this type of documents, the hidden documents from Ripple with governments around the world, and you want to do some research, you can always search for Ripple dear sir or madam. That's how they start all the letters to the governments. And that's a very unique way to find documents that are not meant to the public eye. That's what I have been doing back in 2021 when I wanted to find these sorts of letters between Ripple and governments, where they unveil a lot of the information that is not for marketing purposes, but really gives you an idea of what's happening behind the scenes. That
Yeah.
being said, Versan, what's the someone has a question here, which I think is interesting to address. I don't know if you want to take this one or should I, but he asks, why should we hold both XRP and XLM, not only XRP, for example? Do you want to take this one?
That's I'll let you speak too, but I'll try my best to keep it short. That's something I did want to talk about and bring up. I've been looking very closely into, Ripple. They've been taking a lot of the regulatory heat, while Stellar at the same time has been expanding quietly on a global scale. And I talked to Edo about this before we got on here. I'm working on a new paper I've been working on it for about a week now, and I just need to gather more facts and information. But it's going to be explaining that you need to keep an eye on Stellar, because they're making some major moves behind the scenes, consolidating financial infrastructure as well in ways that most people are not aware of. And if you remember, in 2023, I talked about how Stellar became a member of the CFTC, and both Ripple and Stellar have secured money transmitting licenses in multiple countries and very key states. They're at the same time being adopted globally, and regulations are happening in real time. But I think the world is so distracted waiting for Bitcoin to replicate what Visa did in the 90s, and it goes on and on. But you have to remember the document from the World Bank talking about it takes two to tango. And there's a very intricate and complementary relationship between what Ripple is doing, what Stellar is doing, and that kind of falls into the two-tier monetary framework that the Trust Bridges IMF document talks about intensively. You can actually read this stuff, and it talks about this having that complementary relationship. And they also, they don't say it, but the only digital assets they talk about for that two-tier monetary system is XRP and XLM. It would seem that one is meant for institutional use case, and the other one is more P2P, peer-to-peer transactions, banking the unbanked, etc. After they bankrupt everything, So, I'm still writing a paper on this, but it's very interesting, and it ties me into something I wasn't going to mention. But when Ripple started talking about those private blockchains, and then you start to study the relationship between Ripple and Stellar, it's very possible that SHX, and Ripple is heavily invested into SHX, that they could be using some of these other Stellar issued protocols to move this value. And again, there is that relationship. So something's going on over there. But I don't believe what some people say in the space when they say XRP is going to really top it. I think they have a relationship and they need each other in some way that we don't understand yet. So a lot to look into.
I agree, Versan. It's like two complementary technologies. The same people who created the XRP ledger, one of them left Ripple and proceeds to create Stellar blockchain, which happens to be Jed McCaleb. And I wouldn't underestimate Jed McCaleb. If you really look for his history and the role he has played on cryptocurrencies at a broader perspective, you wouldn't underestimate what Stellar is doing. You have Ukraine building its CBDC on top of Stellar blockchain. But leaving away the technical aspect, which I think Versan, I will not just proceed to repeat what he has said, but also from an investment perspective, we all talking about technologies that's digital assets that, in my opinion, they can do up to a 1000x from these current levels, or up to 100x, 10,000x from the current levels. And the fact that, why wouldn't you want to be diversified on XRP and XLM? Just imagine for a second, if XLM, for example, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if there's a 1% chance that XLM does a 100x before XRP, I am a very patient person, I promise you, but I wouldn't want to live a scenario where I fully understood the potential of both XRP and XLM, and for some reason I decided to go all in on XRP, right? So from my perspective, I really think we should be holding both XRP and XLM. But in any case, if you just hold XRP, well, you are already doing better than 99% of the world's population. And that also brings me to another question. And Versan, he has answered this one in the past. I did a short out of that answer, but he asks, why would the elites allow us? This question always comes, right? Why would the elites allow us to get access to assets like XRP? Do you want to go ahead, Versan, with this one? I remember you have a great answer for this one.
Well, I mean, there's a lot I can say. Well, first things first, I think there are always winners and losers in any evolving landscape. A crisis presents opportunity. That's one way to look at it. The other thing is, the SEC lawsuit, some people think it was a blessing in disguise, which gave people the ability to buy this stuff. But then again, it's also very possible now that XRP is kind of like in that crypto strategic reserve. It also raises the question about a buyback. And just to clarify for people about this buyback thing, it was really always an insurance policy to make sure people were aware of what the value of XRP was with its intended use case. It wasn't like a scam or anything along those lines, because if XRP is going to be used for what we know it's going to be used for, then we have to make sure that we're getting paid for whatever it's worth if they're going to try to confiscate it from people. But that's why you keep everything in a hardware wallet. I don't think I answered the question the same way I did before, but I mean, there are just so many ways you could look into all of this, Edo.
Yeah, you do have multiple angles, but
Right.
I like to answer this as, just think about how many percent of the world's population is holding XRP. I would estimate it's less than 0.1 person out of every 10,000 persons are holding XRP, basically. So you really think that it would bother the elites if a couple thousand people would get rich out of XRP? I think that's the best way to look at it, especially when you understand that first, most people are not doing self-custody. Others will cash out along the way when XRP is at $10, $20, $50. They'll be selling out 100% of their bags. So you have to really ask the question, how many people are going to be still holding to XRP when we get above, let's say, $100? And the higher the price go, the lower the amount of people that are going to be sticking to XRP. And I think that's the particular reason why it doesn't bother the elites or the people who are running the show that retail gets access to XRP. I think that's how I'd like to put this.
I mean, there's another way to look at it. It's very possible too that they're stalling this, and we know they are, and we can talk about Ethereum, and that kind of ties into the middle of stalling this and what they're doing now with Ondo, and a whole different discussion. But the fact that they're still stalling this, even though the SEC is being investigated, they dropped the lawsuit against Coinbase, all these other narratives that are happening now with the pro-crypto administration, et cetera, et cetera. It's very possible that they're dragging this on at the same time, creating these insolvency issues and this exponential expanding debt, which means devaluation of currency, so higher inflation, et cetera, to kind of get people to a point where they're actually selling these assets because they have to pay for goods and services at a higher price. I know a lot of people in the space who've actually sold a lot of XRP because they were expecting it to shoot up, and they did not have their strategies thoroughly planned out as far as being able to take profits and not have to sacrifice those core positions, etc. And as a result of this, people are selling their XRP, and the institutions are scooping them up for pennies on the dollar still. So a lot of people are going to have to sell their assets because they need to pay their bills. They don't have a lot of income, and that's really what the problem is. We don't have regulations when we clearly should have them, and it's because they're siphoning wealth through the crypto space from people. That's why there's no regulation. It's intentional to steal people's wealth, and that's how deep this really goes. It kind of falls into the great taking. So there's going to be a point where the pressure is too much, and the regulations will have to come into fruition. But that's going to be at a time of their choosing, I would say. So who knows?
Thanks for answering, Versan. I was actually finding here some news let me read that for you. So Ripple just filed for a new trademark for a downloadable software that will let you store the cryptocurrency. So is Ripple going to create a wallet? I think that's one of the relevant news of this week. By the way, this week has been quite quiet for the crypto standards, right? There was not so many things happening, but I think this one has been one of the most relevant news that I have seen this week. I think Ripple is projecting itself to become some sort of bank or some
Yeah.
sort of World Bank institution. So it really makes sense that Ripple is going to create their own wallet app. What do you think about that, Versan?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if they're the ones who are regulated, they're the ones offering these services, then why wouldn't they offer the custody, bank, if you will? And I think that's really what Ripple is. They are consolidating all the financial infrastructure. So they are becoming a bank in the process. Eventually, I think it's very possible even Ripple does become your one world central bank. And all these institutions are kind of licensees of maybe a treasury department or even Ripple itself, because they depend on that interoperability. They depend on the liquidity provision. And remember, it's them who are who are enabling these payment rails to where people could use the XRP. So we there are a lot of questions that go into that too. But I think Ripple is becoming a central bank essentially over time.
I want to break this down. Just let me close here the sharing. When it's just the two of us, it's more difficult to manage the screen sharings because it's the multitasking. Anyways, I want to break this down of the wallet in a very interesting way and something that reminds me of Black Mirror. So 2 years ago, I was in the Paris Blockchain Week, and there was a company there which was collaborating with Ripple, and they had this stand which was on the XRP Ledger section of the Paris Blockchain Week. And this company, I will not mention the name of the company. I know some of them follow me on X, and not many people are aware of this company. So this company had a wallet built on top of the XRP, and that was some sort of your wallet for everything. So imagine you have this wallet on your phone. Imagine you have a Xaman wallet, but with a very friendly interface that even your grandparents can use it. Just like you use your app to pay the electricity company. That's how I pay my electricity bills. I have an app. I enter there. I scan the QR code, or I simply pay with Apple Pay. And I think what they are getting ready is some sort of a universal wallet that probably is going to be built on top of the XRP ledger, and that gives me a bit of Black Mirror vibes. And in this wallet, you're going to have the programmable money, which might be the real stablecoin, which has a feature that it can be frozen, it can be confiscated. It has the clawback feature that allows a central authority to have control over the stablecoin, which somehow it's how the US dollar already is controlled. But because we have the physical version of the dollar, it still gives you some sort of authority outside of the system. But when you have a fully digital version of the US dollar and all transactions are made on the blockchain, that also gives you control from the government. So imagine you have this central wallet where everything happens there. You can book for your flights, you can pay for the electricity bill, you can pay for your loan to the bank. And the problem with that is that, let's say, if you make an infraction, they can come and withdraw. I'm not talking about XRP, by the way. I don't want people to make the mistake thinking I'm talking about XRP. Nobody can frozen your XRP. So when you have XRP, we can say you are outside of the system somehow. But I'm talking about stable coins. And I really think that these wallets that Ripple is filing for a trademark, that's going to be the universal wallets. That's going to be somehow the CBDC.
I mean, it's very possible, certainly. I mean, why wouldn't they do it?
I saw this Reddit 2 years ago. They had the everything. It was a very friendly interface with all sorts of services connected to your digital version of money. So it's very interesting times, I would say.
Yeah, and we can always cite Jed McCaleb's statements. I have a tweet about this. It's a video of him talking multiple times, and I kind of chopped it up. But Jed McCaleb is saying we essentially need one universal basic code language. And I think that's what he's referring to, or a payment system. And I already know where this is going, but I mean, yeah, it's just so much going on. Honestly, I would say we're going to get to a point where, because of the geopolitical tensions, there is going to be one universal basic language for all blockchain payment systems. And, you know, that could be playing into it for sure. And I haven't seen that, but thanks for sharing it.
Just a second, Versan. I have one problem here. 1 second. Sorry, got an unexpected call. Anyways.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
I think the next topic that we were supposed to talk is about the death of Ethereum and the ERC20 tokens.
Yeah. Ethereum's experiencing some bleeding out, hence your title. But when we look at Ethereum, I think it's always, for everybody who's investing in this stuff, you have to look at the foundation that it was built on. And those were the relationships with JP Morgan, very corrupt SEC, China. They did a documentary about this, XRP Unleashed. You know, it's not really a system designed for financial freedom or for decentralization or innovation, any of that. We have to be honest about it. It was created as a system for siphoning wealth from people. And we can look at this through many aspects. I'll give you an example. I mean, you look at the gas fees, it's intentionally an inefficient mechanism that extracts billions every year from retail investors when you have technologies like Hedera Hashgraph HBAR, which is faster, cheaper, more scalable, and designed for institutions. So the need for Ethereum's outdated model is already exposed right there and then. HBAR, I think, is Ethereum 2.0, and it actually works. Then again, we talk about the compliance, which collides with all the risk. And Ethereum is heavily supported by Tether. So that kind of ties us into that model again between Tether, which seems to be holding the rest of the crypto space together. And when institutions begin to kind of focus on compliance and regulatory frameworks, you're going to see a lot of, again, that money kind of move away. And you're going to see a lot of cryptocurrencies collapse over time because of regulatory pressures. And that's going to force the right technologies to align that meet with those frameworks. And that's going to help establish their foot in the monetary system.
Yeah, there's a liquidity crisis happening for not only Ethereum, but most of the tokens built on top of the ERC20 ecosystem, as we know. And I think I have said this on the past live streaming, but it's important to repeat. I don't think most of these tokens will ever make a comeback. Most of them are sitting below bear market prices. I think is very concerning. And also that shows that last bull run was not powered by real adoption. It really shows that it was mostly a playground for Ethereum whales. And I have to be careful to not get censored by saying this, but it was mostly a playground for Ethereum whales that wanted to do some money laundry. So they started to pump tokens within the ecosystem. That's why you had tokens doing 4,000 or 5,000% gains. And right now, where are they sitting right now? These tokens are basically non-existent. Even Ethereum is sitting at $1,900 right now. It's way below what it was on the previous bull run. That also shows, someone says, no, sorry. And it's sitting below the prices of the previous bull run. So that also shows that there is the liquidity issue that's affecting the overall crypto, but there has been a section of cryptocurrencies talking about the XRPs, the XLMs, the HBARs, SHX, Velo. It really seems that this time, for the first time in history, we had a utility bull run, which has somehow created the vision in crypto of what has some sort of real world utility and what is just speculation. And we have just a minority of the tokens here on the left, which stands for the tokens that really solve something on the real world. And I think the more the time will pass, the more we're going to see that this transformation is going to start to happen in geometrical progression, meaning that it's going to happen very, very fast.
Yeah, I mean, adoption is consistently moving forward. I even have a video where the title is a constant stream of good news, and it's really that simple. They're setting the stage. They're still doing this, setting the stage for the new system. And we have to be clear about something that kind of ties us into the traditional banking system and the monetary system with the dollar. This system doesn't come into fruition. It does not come into play until central banks altogether have colluded and artificially inflated to expand the debt to the point where fiat currencies lose even more of their value. And that's really what's going to help transition us into the new system, because by devaluing the currency, inflating debt, and expanding it even further, that's going to kind of create the inevitability and the necessity to kind of be bridged into something that kind of not just bridges, but also can kind of fix a lot of the problems. It's a problem reaction solution motto. And it's very interesting. The market was tanking. Again, it's all propped up by the Treasury Department. And that's very interesting because even Trump the other day, I hate to say it like this, I don't want to get attacked by people, but they're already laying the groundwork for more war in the Middle East. He was supposed to be a peace president, but right around the time when the market started to kind of correct because the bond market was under pressure, that's why they went and did this, because they're going ahead to print more money. And if I may throw this out there too, I mean, I've sent messages to a lot of the people from the Q movement. I know a lot of these people. And, I have a question for them. They said the central bank, the Federal Reserve, was supposed to be shut down. Well, it's interesting. Trump actively said, I'm looking for a new head for the Federal Reserve. They said central banks were shut down. Well, central banks just issued new debt. What happened to the Epstein files, which is, by the way, a scapegoat for the real culprits? Which is the governments and the agencies behind that. What happened to the JFK files? What happened to the MLK files? No justice, no arrests, but somehow people are still being told to trust the plan. What plan? I'm telling you, this is a plan where people are sitting back, retweeting things and doing nothing while more wars break out, more freedom disappears. And it's the truth. It's just, it kind of all ties in together, and that's why even Israel was established in violation of the Geneva Convention. I can go on and on, but this is all tied into the debt-based system to keep printing money, widening the wealth gap, but at the same time accelerating the collapse of fiat currencies to transition us into the system. And this is what all the real experts are saying. And I'm not talking about mainstream experts. Those guys are so full of shit. It's the experts who don't get the attention, who are not allowed on the mainstream news, all right? Because they don't want people to know this stuff. So it goes really deep and it's all tied together. But yes, you're correct.
Well said, Versan. Sometimes we have to be careful to not be censored on YouTube when saying certain things. I know X gives us more freedom. However, I think we covered most of the topics. Am I missing something? I think we were supposed to talk about the Ethereum ecosystem. We made some comments on that. What am I missing, Versan? Something else?
I don't think so. I think people need to know that we're going to see more money printing, and the markets are going to turn around. They're using war as an excuse to justify more printing. They're going to have to lower interest rates again. That means more money velocity, means more inflation. But of course, if you're positioned in the right place at the right time, you're going to be able to take profits. But then again, you have to have diversified portfolio. So if one market is contracting, the other one is expanding, right? So you're never really losing money. I can't believe it. Like I put a tweet out the other day about.
By the way, the two assets.
Yeah. What?
Sorry to interrupt you, but the two assets that the two main assets that the BTC Maxis attacked most in the past 6 months are the best performing assets, XRP and gold.
Yeah, there's a lot of tribalism in crypto. And I think with the tribalism, this is like more divide and conquer, even within the crypto community. It's kind of funny. Yet there's also divide and conquer strategies happening geopolitically and pretty much all around the world. People are driven by status, materialism, race, all these really stupid things. And here they are kind of building this new system, and nobody's doing anything about it. No one's actually speaking about it. So, as this transition occurs, I do have some good news actually for gold bugs. We're going to see a lot of the LME and COMEX begin to hit a brick wall. And I think as everything kind of also transitions into blockchain, you're going to see a end of mass manipulation, because a lot of those things that they had in place, these paper trails, it's really to suppress the metal prices for so long, and for many various reasons we can get into. But I'm telling you, price controls are shifting to the east, which means manipulation is coming to an end. And of course, as we transition the blockchain through stablecoins, most likely, true price discovery for physical assets is going to be restored. And we're also seeing like demand exceed what's actually available on the markets. So rather than being buried under layers of paper contracts, real value of gold, real value of silver is going to become very clear. So be in the right place at the right time. I always encourage people to hold precious metals, and of course, have a diversified portfolio so you can take profits when they start to print more money. If you do that, you're going to be okay. You can fight inflation. It beats getting in debt to deal with the inflation.
I think my connection was dropping right now. Can you guys hear me?
I'm going to have to buy you a connection. Yeah, I can hear you. Edo?
I get the most expensive one. I don't know why sometimes it fails. I mean, I think it's just grace, We have many advantages here, but yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, isn't there like a civil war going on in Greece? Well, I guess we lost Edo. Oh, there he is.
There are some protests about an accident. Yeah. I'm trying to fix the connection here. Just give me a second.
Okay. Yeah. So, I might as well take a quick question from some of you guys. Just throw out a question. I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah, I'm back.
Edo, do you want to maybe take a few questions for the next 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Velo or XLM? I'll be happy to answer this one. So Velo or XLM? I would say both. Velo is a borrowing and lending mechanism, and it's also changing the way QR codes are done through bills. And it's also built on the Stellar network. So in a sense, it's ISO compliant since it's part of that. And I saw another question earlier about ISO compliance, and somebody did their research on it. And just to simplify and clarify things, ISO compliance is nothing fancy. It's nothing intricate that, it's hard to understand. ISO compliance is pretty much just about updating the banking system to where these blockchains can communicate effectively. And that's the whole interoperability part. That's it. There's nothing more to it. Sometimes if you have an app on your phone and you want to use this app, but it won't let you until you update your phone. So the new software can work with that application, which is also updated or light years ahead. You have to update your phone for it to work. It's the same thing, but banks are doing that for the new systems that are being put into place. Jake Claver's domino theory. I haven't researched it, but I know Jake Claver very well. He's a great guy, smart individual. AI tokens, I think AI is in a bubble, and generally crypto's in a bubble. I think AI is more focused on the technology rather than blockchain protocols. I know IOTA is something to do with AI in there. It's interoperable between AI and pay-to-play kind of things. So not really sure about that. Edo, do you want to take a question?
Yeah, there are some here. Do I sell my Ethereum and Solana at a loss for XRP? That's a difficult question because I can't time the markets, but I would argue that there's still a last pump left for Ethereum. There are too many whales holding to it, so I do think you have a better chance of selling it at higher prices in the future, but that's not financial advice. That's just my take on that. But I do think the death of Ethereum is programmed. There's another one, XRP and TIPS. TIPS is the Target Instant Payments. It's an European protocol for payments that the central banks are utilizing. And yes, I did a video on that. So if you want more information, you can always look on my channel or on my X account. Just type XRP and TIPS. And the fact is that they were trying to hide from the public eye that TIPS was interconnected with the XRP ledger. And I somehow found very good evidences that TIPS has already incorporated the XRP ledger. So it's also a hint that the digital euro is going to run on top of the XRP ledger if you already have the European banks integrating the XRP ledger on TIPS. So that's a very relevant statement. Let me see some other questions here.
This time is different, or do you agree with TA guys that the 4-year cycle is always leading? That's actually a good question. The 4-year cycles, I think they're still in effect. Typically, you'll have all this money printing, Bitcoin over the last, every 4 years, you have a presidential cycle, you have a Bitcoin cycle, you have debt refinancing, which really kind of ties us into why M2 money supply goes up. So when they have to refinance the debt, they're going to have to print more money. So typically that kind of is a leading indicator behind these 4-year cycles. I do think that's still in effect. Debt refinancing for the United States is happening this year in 2025. And that's where Vendel and I believe that they are going to have no choice. They're going to have to print money, which is another reason why I believe the stage is being set to a degree for war, because war is going to make the inevitability for central banks to print more money. And again, that helps them with their agenda in consolidating wealth, but at the same time, collapsing fiat currencies to bring the transition, right? But the TA guys, I think they're, not the crypto TA guys, because crypto TA guys, they don't understand that crypto derives its value from the stock market, and the stock market is deriving its value directly from the bond market. So that's how many treasuries we can issue to the world, and that's trust in the dollar. So I get my TA directly from the central banks. I don't follow these TA guys. But yes, I would say the 4-year cycle is still leading. We're going to see some money printing, and that means the markets are going to go higher. And this could be, again, the final top for it, because we have to be mindful that the purchasing power is almost gone. And that's why central banks are buying gold. So all this kind of ties in together. Timing is everything, right? So I would agree on that. And the lawsuit, I think it's going to conclude at a time of their choosing. XRP is not just an American issue. It's been adopted all over the world. It's in motion. It's growing very fast. And the lawsuit seems to be suppressing awareness, buying time for them. So that will conclude at the time of their choosing, because it's a geopolitical thing. It really is. It changes the dynamic of the monetary system, including the reserve currency status. So that's how deep it goes. Edo, I think you froze. CBDC UBI. FedNow will distribute the UBI. Some people are going to call it a central bank digital currency. Some people are going to call it UBI, whatever it is called. Even Elon Musk made a statement about this yesterday with Ted Cruz, when he was saying about what are people going to do in the next 10 years when artificial intelligence and robotics is like all over the world. People are not going to have... They're going to need the desire to be useful and to contribute to the economy. So I think that ties us in. And, Elon Musk has openly talked about UBI in the past. So UBI is something that I think will be inevitable if the tech grows as fast as it is. At the same time, you have a very small population, part of the population that has sufficient wealth. The rest of the future, the generations, I think, is part of the ninja generation. No income, no jobs, no assets. So there's going to be a point where people are going to need some sort of money, if you will. So they're going to need money. And I think that's what central banks have perfected. They've perfected the art of printing money out of thin air to devalue the currency and consolidate your wealth and charge you interest for that. And they're buying your assets that you're forced to sell because you have to pay higher price of goods and services. So that kind of also ties into that, the wealth confiscation, right? So UBI, it's going to get to a point where we have a UBI. I think so. A lot of people, again, don't have money. They need assistance. A lot of people have welfare. So that's just it's gonna be a continuation of that. Edo, is your Wi-Fi good? Your Wi-Fi, Edo. We gotta fix that. Also, another question I get a lot is what hardware wallets do I use? Cold wallets. I don't think any digital infrastructure is safe and secure, to be honest, but for security protocols, I think it's important that you have multiple hardware wallets, cold storage, preferably. I know people said some negative things about Ledger in the past. I did some research on that. It's not like you're obligated to give up your seed phrase. So that's something you'd have to pay for. I don't think it's a security risk. So I would have a Ledger too, but at the same time, I would also have a Descent wallet and even a Tangent wallet. Another piece of advice, stay away from Lobster. I've warned people about this many times years ago, actually. If you're trying to buy SHX, there's a better way to do this. You could buy it directly through Stellar Term, and you'd have to have your Ledger wallet. You'll buy XLM from Uphold, move the XLM onto your Ledger wallet, connect your Ledger wallet to stellarterm.com, and you swap your XLM for SHX, and then you move your SHX from Stellar Term directly to your Descent wallet on a Stellar Trust line. Very simple, very easy to do. So, and we do teach this in our courses, and of course, Edo has his courses too, where I'm sure we go more into detail about these things. But yeah, if you guys ever want to book a session, just reach out to us at Black Swan Capitalists. I try my best to respond in the comments, but I don't have the energy or time to answer questions thoroughly. Edo, is your internet good?
My connection is working now.
Okay, good, because I'm
honestly
hanging out here.
I started to question if it's the connection. It's because I am using a spare laptop. I didn't have the best week. My laptop had a factory defect, so I switched back to a previous one that is from 2021 or 2022. So I don't really know if it's the laptop or if it's the connection.
It's okay.
Anyways,
yeah,
I would like. There is a final question I would like to take here.
Sure.
And someone asks if I would to invest $10,000, if we would diversify XRP, HBAR, XLM, gold, silver. And honestly, if I had only $10,000 to invest, I wouldn't diversify that much. It's kind of tricky because it's like if you have $10,000 and to buy 5 or 10 different assets and those assets perform extraordinarily well, your gains are almost like cut substantially because honestly, you're just putting $500 on each asset. So I think you have better chances on sticking to the fundamentals. I would just get some XRP and XLM. Perhaps I would make like 70-30, and I wouldn't be getting precious metals with just $10,000. Don't know about you, Versan. Would you make something different on that?
Well, real quick, I did. Before I get into that, somebody mentioned that they bought SHX from on the Ethereum network. I wouldn't recommend buying it on the Ethereum network because I don't trust Ethereum. But then again, it's very expensive. So if you do need to move it back and forth, you're going to pay a higher gas fee.
Yeah.
The reason I recommend Stellar Term is because you're buying it directly off their Stellar network where it was initially created and issued. So it's safer, it's more secure, it's cheaper because again, Stellar is a regulated network at the highest levels of all governments and financial institutions. So it's just a safer way to do it. I'm sorry, Edo, what was your question?
Someone asked if $10,000, if we would diversify on XRP, XLM, HBAR, gold and silver, I think he said. And I have said that with just $10,000, I would just stick to XRP and XLM.
Like a portfolio allocation. But then again, see, everyone's financial situation is a bit different. That's why we have these sessions. We tailor the conversation to your financial situation. I actually ask you questions about it. But see, everyone having a different financial situation, it's important to understand that, again, the real war is against inflation. right? So some people who are just getting into the space, for instance, they need to diversify, sure, into a little bit of XRP and some other technologies. But then again, you want to have a majority of that position into something like VLO and SHX because they are being regulated, they are being adopted, they do have true fundamentals that are going to be revealed in time. And they're going to perform very similar to how XRP did. Remember when XRP was at 40 cents and now it's at like $3? That's an example. Everyone now is looking back and saying, I wish I bought more. You see what I mean? So the fact that SHX and VLO with real use case and fundamentals are still very cheap and have the fundamentals, this is an opportunity for you to fight inflation by positioning yourself with a few 100,000 tokens at these prices. I can pull it up right now. SHX is about 0.008. That's an example. So you're going to get more for your dollars compared to fighting inflation. And when the market begins to move, and it will move, this is just how it is, it's cyclical, you're going to be able to take profits. And that's exactly what I did recently. And it's a statement I wanted to like follow up on. I posted a tweet earlier about how I took nearly 100,000 in profits from SHX and VLO, 42 and some change at their highs. But I have to take profits, right? You have to, because again, you're fighting inflation. It's better than getting in debt to deal with that inflation, where then you're shackled to the system. And that debt will roll over into the new system. Anyone that says there's going to be a debt jubilee, so just keep growing your debt, that's retarded. And I know there are a lot of people in the space who do say that stuff, and I have a lot of loopholes for what they're saying that's inaccurate and not good financial advice. Some people we had on the show before, and I think you guys know who I'm talking about, said gold was going to zero. There's no need for it. Gold hits $3,000. You know what I mean? And it's going to continue to increase. So don't listen to certain people that believe that somebody's going to come and save you. That's not true. You're going to have to save yourself, and you have to be smart about this. None of us can afford to really fuck this up. We can't make mistakes because I think this could possibly be the final wealth transfer. And the reason I say this is because once everything goes digital, that's it. It's kind of in that system, right? And the traditional systems are falling apart. They're being bridged into something new. So just be at the right place at the right time and be smart about it. And also, great question for everybody. Point also, if you're spending more than you're earning, then you're in trouble. Always turn it around if you can. You want to try to be minimal, try to live within your means, and try to stay out of debt if you can, because that's the trap. I think so. And if someone is dissolving your debt jubilee, which is possible, somebody else is going to benefit from that for sure.
Nicely said, Versan. I think we are getting close to the 60 minutes, so perhaps we jump to final thoughts.
Those
We
were my
have
final
almost
thoughts.
5,000 people watching live right now, so want to send a special thanks to the audience.
Yeah.
Final words, Versan?
Keep seeing a lot of questions. They just keep popping up. End of year predictions. I mean, price predictions, we don't have crystal ball, obviously, but that's all going to depend on institutional backing, and that comes from regulation. That's one way to look at it. As far as that M2 money supply, you could see some price movements, but it's going to be at a time of their choosing. And again, I think XRP is a very unique one, because when people are like focused on the price movements of it, you have to think bigger. You have to throw out the traditional mindset of an investor and think a little bit bigger, as far as it's really changing the monetary landscape. So it's going to take a little bit longer, I think. And I come to understand that in 2022, after the lawsuit kept dragging on, I was like, okay, something else is going on here. But I think some of these technologies, XDC, Quant, HBAR, people keep asking about that. They're very complementary, and XRP and XLM are complementary. That hasn't necessarily been revealed, but if you do the research, it's actually out there. You can read between the lines, if you will, and you'll figure that out. You come to the same damn conclusion. Those are my final thoughts.
Tango.
Yeah, it will take two to tango. Yeah. All right.
I'm just reading some comments here. I wish we had time to answer all of them. anyways, I want to send a special thanks to the audience. And remember, guys, be patient. I think this year we have many things ahead. ISO 20022 going live. It's going to be a very interesting year for the digital assets that we are invested. So thank you, everyone. Versan, something extra you would like to add?
I think I'm good. I have a session coming up soon, so I'll talk to you guys next week. Yeah.
I was not so fresh today, guys. I had some tooth infection that is really draining my energy. So adding that with the connection problems, it was not the most fresh mind today. But anyways,
it's okay. There's always next time. Yeah. And also, I might as well add this. We have a really great guest coming on March the 31st. His name is Matthew. He was the one that did this long conversation with Francis Hunt and a few others in Cape Canaveral about the crypto landscape, specifically XRP, Ripple. He did talk about those things. So we're bringing him on for like a 55-minute discussion, but mostly it's going to be about gold, stablecoins, and of course, XRP. So he's going to give us some real insight on that, and he's super connected. So that's going to be a great call. I'm looking forward to it. All right. So yeah, take care, everyone, and have a wonderful day and stay vigilant.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to see you next Monday. Not Tuesday. Today we did Tuesday, but it's going to be on Monday.
We'll try.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys. Take care. Bye.